Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Empowered to Live, the podcast where faith meets purpose and purpose fuels freedom. I'm your host, Andrea Rose Butler of the Becoming Women's Network, and tonight we are starting a brand new series. As you know, I love my series. It keeps me focused and it's easier to plan when you have a series. And so this episode, we're going to be talking about the power of vision. Vision, and it kind of fed over from last week's episode when we talked about vision. And this time we're going to go a little bit deeper into understand vision. So vision is not just about seeing the future, it's about aligning your heart with God's direction for your life, and moves with intention rather than reaction. We talked a little bit about that last week as well, about reacting versus a response. And so this week we're going to be talking about seeing beyond changes everything. So when you have a clear vision, it helps you to move forward. So vision is more than goal setting. And I love a goal setting. It's a spiritual insight. It's the ability to see beyond what is right in front of you and trust that God is working even when the path is not clear. So when you can't see your way and you don't understand what's happening and you're like, God, what is going on? It's dark out here. Or it's, my favorite saying from the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, it's always winter and never summer. And we just can't see beyond the season that we're in, the space that we're in. And we're like, God, help me because I don't know what's going on. I feel like my life is crashing out and I don't know what your plan is. And me and God have had several conversations over the years about, God, what exactly is your plan? Do you have a plan? I know your word says you do, but I don't. The way my life is going right now, I don't think you have a plan. I think you're just piecing it together, and we're working as we go. We know that's not who God is, but sometimes that's how life feels. That God is just like He's putting it together as He goes along. He's patching it up, and I know that He's working all things together for my good and for your good, but it doesn't always appear that way. And so we can get frustrated, but we can see when we see beyond everything that's going on, when we can look beyond the pain, when we can look beyond the death of a loved one, when we can look beyond, why I lost my job, why my life is like this, why my finances are in ruin. When we can look beyond all of those things, we can see and we can get a clearer vision when we can see beyond those things. Because when God gives you a vision, it changes how you interpret every season. So when it may look like it's winter and it's cold and everything looks like it's dying, God gives us a vision that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that there is joy coming in the morning, that this weeping it's not going to last always. You know, I think it was John P. Key had a song called Trouble Don't Last Always. No, you know the song. So trouble doesn't last always. We can be glad about that. And that's one of the lines in the song. He says, I'm so glad that trouble doesn't last always. And then also you're gonna correct me on who sings it. And in my mind, I know it's not John P. Key, but that's who popped into my head right now. And so we looked at our scripture for today is from Hebrews 11:1. Now everybody quotes this one. It says, now faith is the confidence in what we hope for, and it's the assurance or the evidence of what we do not yet see. So we know we have hope, and the hope does not cause us to be made ashamed. And so we can hold on to hope. And so faith allows us to see beyond our circumstances. And when vision or your why, I'm big on your why. When you have your why and you have that, you can look beyond our current circumstances, when we're rooted in faith and God's purpose. And it nurtures us to hope and to trust. And it encourages us that it builds confidence in the journey. When we can hope and we can say, God, I know that this is what you said. And we can hold on to that. We're holding on to hope. We say hope is the anchor. One scripture says that it's the anchor of our soul. So we can anchor what God says in the hope of what God is saying to us. So faith, again, allows us to see beyond our circumstances. And when it's rooted in God's purpose, it nurtures us. So vision changes our perspective. Again, that when we see, all we see is winter. All we see is clouds and stormy days and um, rain clouds, hanging over our head. And it's just, why is it just raining on me and nobody else? And we can look out and we can see. And so without hope, without vision, our obstacles feel permanent. Again, like that saying says, the Tumnus says, it's always winter and never summer. When we look at it and we anchor it, our vision can change, and so we can see things as being permanent instead of temporary. And so with vision, obstacles become part of the process, and God is processing us, and that process does not always feel comfortable when we're growing, and He's stretching us beyond, what we're able to bear. And we're like, God, I'm about to pop, like a rubber band, and you stretch it too much. Sometimes we feel like, God, I'm at the breaking point, and I've had several of those in my life where I'm, God, I'm about to break, you know, and I need you to step in. And, people always say, well, God gives, all these troubles to His strongest soldiers. No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. It's not that God gives anything to, because God doesn't give it, He allows it. But God is not the one who brings that onto us. And so we shouldn't tell people that, that when they're facing difficulties, that this is happening because God has given it to us because we're strong. Life circumstances happen to us. And, whether by our choices, whether by somebody else's choice, and sometimes just life in general happens. And we have difficult seasons, sicknesses come, death comes, loss of jobs come, all of these things. And I face a lot of those sicknesses, terminal illnesses, all of these things, near death, divorce, all these things happen in life. And they are sometimes, when they accumulate, again, this is where we get into that feeling where I'm like, God, I'm at my breaking point. And then, the word says that He gives a way of escape, but sometimes I'm like, God, that the way of escape is blocked. I don't see a way out. And sometimes He has to give us vision. He gives us vision for that reason. He changes our perspective, and we can look and say, this is not a permanent situation. And that we recognize that it's a part of the process. And vision doesn't deny difficulties, but it gives us context as we are growing, and as we're learning. Joseph had a vision before he was in the pit. And I know when he was in that pit, when his brothers were sitting around eating, and he was in that pit saying, help me, and I can't get out, and what are you guys doing? And he heard them talking about killing him, and he was in that pit. I'm pretty sure, at 17, his life was flashing before his eyes. He was like, I haven't lived anything yet. And what about the vision God gave me? What about my dream? So he probably had some moments where he felt discouraged, because he's there. Here are the people who are supposed to love me are talking about ending my life. And then, another one comes and he tells me, and I'm in a strange land where I don't speak the language. I don't know these people. I've had servants. Now I am the servant. And then somebody lies on him. He ends up in jail. And he's there for an extended period of time, almost 20 years, that he spends in prison for a crime he didn't commit. And I know he was just like, but God, you gave me a vision. You told me that my siblings and my parents and people were going to bow down before me, and I was going to be this great ruler. But here I am in prison. But God he was in the process. Same thing with David. David was anointed king. He was also around 17, something about that 17. And he leaves his father's home. He slays Goliath, and he's like, yes, look at me. I'm this big man. I killed this giant. And, everybody's like praising him. But it was a process. He needed to learn humility, because he kills Goliath when he's only 17 years old. He's a young boy. And can you imagine the big head he had when this happens, everybody's praising him. The king wants to give him, all his wealth. He's got all this stuff. He doesn't learn responsibility. He hasn't learned how to handle the weight of what he was given. So he had to go through the process. And that process was running from his life. The process was learning how to survive with little. The process was drawing close to God so that he became a man after God's own heart. But he had to go through a process. Esther, before, she had a vision, but she had to take a risk. And sometimes we don't want to take risks. When God gives us a vision, it could be like me and my family packing up, leaving Los Estados Unidos, and moving to a foreign country where we don't really speak the language. We never lived here. We visited, but to live here in this whole environment of a whole another culture and leave everything behind, jobs and all this other stuff, and people are like, "Oh, you're brave," and I'm like, "No, you don't understand how scared we were," and still are in moments, but we're doing what God has a plan for us, and we had to take a risk in order for us to see what God had. And sometimes that risk, again, is stepping out of the place of comfort and moving into a space where, everything is unfamiliar. You notice that all of these situations that God moved David and Joseph and Esther into places that were unfamiliar. And he moved them into that place where they were out of their comfort. And that's what vision takes. Vision takes us moving out of the place where we are comfortable in order for us to achieve, the vision and the plan that God has for our life. And we can't achieve that when we sit in the place of comfort, when we don't want to take that risk and that vision. Again, when you know your why will allow you to take crazy risks, will allow you to step out, will allow you to be able to say, look, I understand, I'm struggling right now, but I understand that there's a vision ahead of me. And God didn't promise me that it was going to be, awesome. And so God often gives us vision long before the outcome appears. So you're like, well, I'm just working this job and I don't understand. But what is God teaching you on the job that you're in? What is God teaching you in the place that you're in? And when you look at that from the place of vision, it makes it better. What am I learning from here? Who are the people that I'm interacting in? And then what lessons am I learning from them? What lessons am I learning from the place that I'm in, from this job, from the people that surround me? All of these things. Every place that you have been, a lesson was learned. And so when we need to look back and when we open our eyes and God gives us vision, we can see that every place that I have been, I have learned something. I have gained some insight. God has stretched us in certain ways, but we have to see that. So what are some of the things that keep us from having that vision? We focus only on the present circumstances. Again, we're looking at it and we're like, it's always winter and never summer. So I'm only seeing the winter. I'm only seeing the rain clouds. I'm only seeing my right now. I don't have a job right now. I'm not married right now. I don't know how to do this now. Those are temporary. And the thing is that we say now and not, this is not a permanent, it's not a period, it's a comma. And then we recognize that and we can move beyond that, we can grow. Fear or dreaming again after disappointment. That's a big one. You know, I shared earlier with someone that, I used to own a bookstore. And the big story about that, but that's for another day. And we end up having to close that bookstore because of circumstances that was beyond my control. And that was disappointing for me, because that was a dream that I had. But God had other plans as well for me. But I learned from that business, and I've grown from that business, and I've learned how to do that. And I've helped other people start businesses because I've had that experience. Yes. And just because I was disappointed in that, you know, doesn't mean that it was a permanent thing, but I learned a lesson that I can share with others and how to do. So what disappointment have you had and you're looking back and you're like, I can't try again? Try again. I have been trying to go to school. I've been sharing this before forever. I wanted to earn a bachelor's degree, and I've got through so many parts of college, just never seemed to can get there. And I went, and now I'm back in school, and in about 3 weeks, I will have my bachelor's degree. Have I been disappointed? Yes, but I'll have my bachelor's degree in about 3 weeks. I will be finished, all done with that, and then I'm also in the process of working on my master's degree. So, all of these things that I had a disappointment. I mean, doors have closed for me with school. I'm like, God, it's always something. Why are these doors always closing? I will start and something happened, whether it was school, whether it was the finances wasn't there or whatever happened. And it always seemed that door closed. And then, the past year or so, that opened the door for me to go back to school. And I was like, yes. And now here we are. I'm crossing the finish line. Um, I've got, 3 more classes and my final. And I will have that, but I could have given up, and even during this time, I was like, my health has, as you all know, been watching this podcast, my health has been in the tank for the past year. But I had a vision and I want to finish, and we're going to finish. So limiting God based on past experiences. Again, doors have closed for school. Some of this stuff has happened, but God opened this opportunity for me to go. And when we are going, scholarship and all this other stuff, God just opened doors for me to be able to do this. And I'm so thankful for that. Losing hope. What are you waiting on? What has been your winter season where you just cannot see summer ever coming? The leaves have all fallen off the trees and everything seems to be dying around you, and you're about to give up. You're losing hope because you've been waiting so long. I want to encourage you, continue to hold on to hope, anchor yourself in the hope, that summer is coming. The thaw is coming. Life is going to come again. Spring is going to show up. Summer is going to show up. And so just anchor yourself in that. So renew. And one of the ways we can do that is to renew our mind with God's promises. What is God saying to you? What is God reminding you of? And if you need help, I wrote a book a few years ago called Just for Me, The Power of God's Promises. It's on Amazon. And so if you want to go back and look at some of the promises that God has given to us, and we just need to remind ourselves and anchor ourselves, renew our mind in God's promises. What is God saying to me about this situation? Surround yourself with faith building voices. Who is speaking into your ears? Who are you surrounding with? If people are just always, Debbie Downers, and they're always doubt, and they're always never going to work. It's never going to happen. You tried that before and it didn't work. Those are the people you want to clear. You want to clear those out. You need people who are going to say, just because it didn't work before doesn't mean it won't work this time. Look at, Thomas Alva Edison when he was asked about the light bulb. And it was like, you tried, 99 times and it didn't work. He said, no, what I did was I learned that it doesn't work this way, but I've learned what works. And so when we look at lessons, it's again our perspective. He failed. He was like, you failed 99 times. And he's like, no, I learned that it's not going to work those times. And so the lessons that I learned from the 99 times brings me to the place that I am right now, where I've developed the outer part of the light bulb. And, and I had somebody to help me develop the filament that won't blow the light bulb. And so together, so you need those voices, those people that one of our homework assignments was about, connections and how God puts together connections. So like Elijah, he had a raven by the brook, and then he had this woman, unrelated people or objects or things that brought about the fulfillment of purpose. And we need those people in our lives that are going to feed into us, feed hope. into us that's gonna build us up, build up our faith. Watch what you look on social media. What are you watching on TV? What are you listening to as far as music? Is this stuff that's building you up, or is it stuff that's tearing you down? And so we've got to work on all of those things. So all the voices around you need to be speaking to your vision, speaking hope and life into you, and not the ones that sometimes you may have to clean house and clear out. Like sometimes when your computer gets stuck and they tell you to clear your cookies and cache out and declare the history out. Sometimes we have to do that with our lives. We need to clear out the cookies. So those are those um, things from websites that you've been to that track you. Sometimes they can clog you up, and it makes it easier for you to return back to those websites. And so when you clear out those cookies and the caches that turn you back to your former places, we need to do a history delete and clear out the cookies and cache and delete your history, delete your browsing history, because you don't want all those things to make it easy for you to go back and find. So we go in and clear those out. Write down what God places on your heart. So, what are some of the things? What is that vision? Again, going back to what's your why? I share in my book, Renewing Your Dreams, that what's that one thing that you can't get rid of, that you keep coming back to it over and over again? For me, was this the Becoming Woman's Network. For me, it was doing this, inspiring women, empowering women in particular to find their voice and to gain the vision that God has placed in their heart for who they are. And so that's my purpose, to inspire and to encourage and to motivate you to step into and find out your purpose in Christ. And find out what was you created to do, because we all are created for something. We are not just here to take up space. We are here with purpose, on purpose. God designed you uniquely, you, how you look, how you walk, how you talk, how you have lived your life, the experiences that you have, because He has a plan. He has a purpose just for you to fulfill. You have your brick to lay. So write that down and then rehearse it. Trust and patience are essential, as obstacles can become overwhelming. They can overwhelm you. And I know it can. You can feel that. And we must remain resilient and calm during challenges. So resilience is the key. Everybody talks about resilience. And that resilience just means that I'm not giving up. I'm going to take the hill. When David was facing defeat, and they had left to go into battle, and they came back and all their stuff was gone and their families were gone and all the things that were gone, and the people wanted to kill David, because it was like, we followed you and this is what happened. We lost all of our stuff. And David had to pray about in that moment, and God said, go and recover all. And so he took resilience to silence the voice of those who were trying to end his life, and for him to go, and God says, go and recover all. And this is what is your word for today. Recover what God has given you. Right? Reclaim your vision. Reclaim your dream. Reclaim the purpose. That you buried it. God said, no, go back, dig it up, dust it off, and reclaim it. Begin to walk in that again, and remain resilient. Keep going. Keep pushing. Don't give up. I know that God has a vision, so we have to trust. So trust and patience are required. So challenge time. So take time this week to write down one area of your life where you need God's vision instead of your own perspective. Again, what is one area where you need God's vision instead of your perspective? I wear glasses, and sometimes when I take my glasses off, when I'm looking at things, far away, they get blurry, and so we need our vision checked. I remember when I first got my glasses, I had lived for about 14 years without didn't recognize that what I was seeing was not clear, because it has always been that way. I remember when I got my glasses the first time, the optometrist took me outside, and he's like, this is what the world is supposed to look like. And I was like, wow, everything has always been blurry. I didn't know that I didn't know I couldn't see, because I had always seen the world that way. I had always the world has always had always been blurry. I thought this is how the world looked. I didn't know that it was different until I got glasses, and then I was like, wow, it makes a whole world of difference. And sometimes we need new eyes, we need new glasses, and sometimes our vision changes, and we may have glasses, and we'd be like, Lord, I'm seeing, but He was like, no, you may need a stronger prescription. So ask God to give you His perspective, because He sees. He's got 20/20 vision, and ask Him for guidance. Seek His guidance to help you to see that perspective. Ask Him to help you to see beyond your present circumstances, whatever that may be, whatever however challenging it may be. Ask God to give you that vision to see beyond where you are. And then for my writers, those who like to journal, where have I allowed circumstances to shape my outlook? And where have I allowed my circumstances to shape my outlook? Because sometimes, again, when we're in the situation, we can't always see what's going on. And so, what might God be inviting you to see differently? What is He inviting you to see differently? And what dream or vision have you stopped believing in? Again, go back and reclaim it. You may have to dig it out. If you've got your journal and you've written years ago, this is what I want to do with my life. This is what I feel God is telling me to do. This is what I want to pursue. Whether you want to be an author, maybe like me, you want to go back to school, and that's been a dream of yours. And go back and pursue it. Ask God to give you a clear vision. Maybe finances was a reason why you didn't go. You know, there are so many grants and things out there, that you can get and look at different types of schooling. And what is your focus? What area you wanted to be in? So my area is in ministry, but my master's is going to be in marriage and family. But to pursue a ministry, and there were so many things about ministry that I didn't know, that I've learned since I've been in school. And so those are things that we're going to pursue. Maybe like me, I've always wanted to write a novel. Guys, I'm famous for my devotionals and Bible studies and all those different things. And the Lord laid on my heart a while back to write a novel. And that's what I'm in the process of right now. So I'm in the process of writing that. I shared that a couple of weeks ago. That's the prompting. I heard. I was listening to something, and they said, "Destiny's Hope," and that just struck me, and I was just like, "Wow, that sounds like a good book title." But I was thinking, "Oh, this is gonna be another like Bible study." And I was like, "Mm-mm." And so I'm in the process of writing a novel. Pray for me, because I was sharing earlier with someone, and I said I put it in chat, and I was like, I've written this much. I've got like about 9,000 words, and chat was like, and I was like, how is this for a novel? And chat was like, no, no. Most novels are about 55 to 60,000 words. So you've got a good starter. And this is a great memoir, but this is not resellable as it stands. And I was just like, okay, so you want to insult me? And he was just like, well, um, you look like you've mentioned things, but you haven't expanded. And so you can go back and expand. And there's no um, early years type situation, like you've arrived here, but how did you get there? And I was like, okay, so I never thought about that. I'm like, okay, so yeah. So I went back to the drawing board. It was like, you have a good start at what you may just want to archive what you've written and start over. And I was like, oh, why do you hate me? But it was good. Again, I'm learning. And so my perspective could be like, you know what? I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna do this. But I was like, you know what? I'm gonna sit here and do the work. And so I sit here, I do homework, and then I'm up here and I'm typing, and I'm expanding my brain, and things are coming, things are flowing. But there's a lot of work to go. So maybe that too. Maybe that's something you've always wanted to do. You got book titles that are sitting in your drawer that you don't know what to do with, and you started, dust them off and get to writing. Put that application in if you want to go back to school. If you want to start a podcast, just get started. There are so many tools out there, and I can tell anyone, if you need help getting started, message me, and I'll be more than happy. You can go to my website and book a consultation call. We can just talk through it. I did that with a friend, a former coworker. She was just like, "I'm thinking about writing a book." I said, "Go to my website, book a consultation call. Let's talk." And we did, and we came up with title, sort of like chapter outlines, formatting, all this other stuff, just brainstorming. And so if that's what you need to do, there is no cost. Just let's work on this. Let's get it together. And so, have that dream or vision that you stop believing in. Let's pull it out and let's work on it. We're empowered to live. That's what we're going to do. We're empowered to live the vision that God has called us to do. And so, if today's message resonated with you, share this episode with someone who needs encouragement to keep believing. And remember that vision begins when we allow God to shape what we see. We allow Him to change our perspective. And so I'll see you again next Thursday as we continue our series on the power of vision, how to create God-centered vision. And so just join us next week. Again, share it with a friend. And if you miss any episodes of the podcast, you can go to my YouTube channel, check it out there. Subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes that come up. And I appreciate all of you. You have a wonderful night. And remember to stay empowered. Bye-bye.